And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us after a crazy day around the world of sports. Anyway, good news: Damar Hamlin seems to be recovering well and continues to progress after a devastating injury on Monday Night Football. Hopefully, he continues to improve and his condition continues to get better. Everybody in the sports world's thoughts are still with him and his family, the Buffalo organization, the Cincinnati Bengals, the entire NFL family as well. Wishing him well and hoping a speedy recovery. Now, of course, Major League Baseball, we've been talking a lot about over the past couple of months, and we got some news out over the past couple of days that's kind of turned the sport a little bit on its head a little bit. First and foremost, the Rafael Devers. First, we all thought he was going to get the arbitration deal, the 1 year, $17.5 million deal. Less than 24 hours later, we get the full extension for Rafael Devers, 11 years, $331 million. Overall, just a great deal for the player. This is about what we expected him to get on the open market if he had actually been able to reach it. That would have been the higher end of what he could have gotten on the open market. So I'm glad he's able to get the number he was looking for. Not sure he would have been able to take any type or any less of a deal from a team like Boston, just because look at where Boston is right now. They're relying on getting some of their younger players up in their system anyway. Tristan Cassis, etc. There's rumors out there that they could trade Cassis, however, to the Miami Marlins for Pablo Lopez. I don't see the wisdom in that type of a move. Sure, it gives you a good starter, but you already have some decent starters in that rotation. He is younger, so he'd be a good starter to have in that rotation as well. But losing Tristan Cassis is where you lose it for me if I'm a Red Sox fan. I would not be willing to do that if I were a Boston Red Sox fan. Now, for the contract extension itself, 11 years. The length is a little bit scary in terms of 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11 years of that deal anyway, just because he's not exactly a stalwart defensively. We've seen a lot of comparisons over the last couple of days that he was the next Adrian Beltre, if you will. Offensively, I can see that, sure, and of course we see a lot of comps like this as far as players that look and have play a similar feel in the game anyway. But for me, he doesn't play anywhere near the glove that Adrian Beltre did during his career, and so that's kind of where where you lose the comparison for me. To me, I saw the comp anyway today on Hot Stove about the Austin Riley contract extension, 10 years, $212 million for a very comparable offensive player, and that's what Rafael Devers is for Boston. A very offense-first type player, and they're very similar players, yet Boston is paying $100 million more for Rafael Devers than Austin Riley. Now, am I saying Devers is the same player as Riley? I don't think they're quite the same, but I'm just saying offensively they're very comparable, yet is it worth $100 million more for Devers, perceived as the better player, rather than having Austin Riley? Some food for thought, if you will. The other bit of news that I wanted to get to was Carlos Correa. He's had kind of a crazy offseason so far this offseason, had a crazy one last year as well. And most recently, he failed the physical for the New York Mets. He supposedly went out to the ballpark anyway in New York to kind of get some workouts in with his son over the last couple of days. Had an I Love New York shirt on his son anyway, so he seemed like he was going to be heading towards New York, and that still may end up happening. But today we get the news that not only has his negotiations stalled with the New York Mets, they're really kind of entrenched in their stances. The Mets want some type of offset language in there, and Correa is not willing to budge. That has left the door open for other teams to enter the sweepstakes, and it seems like the Minnesota Twins, the one team the New York Mets should be fearful of anyway, as far as trying to pry away Carlos Correa, they're the one team that already knows his medicals, that already comfortable with the player, that absolutely need to have that player and have had one of the worst off seasons so far in Major League Baseball. If they keep Carlos Correa, that offseason looks so much better now for the Minnesota Twins. We'll see if they're able to get the deal done. Welcome in James. Welcome in Bryce. Boston's lucky Devers agreed to the deal. I am right there with you. If I were Rafael Devers, Boston isn't exactly going to be a contending team for the next 2 years. Maybe when they get to their next window of contention, if they spend money in free agency, get Shohei, whatever the case may be. But right now, the future is very bleak in Boston, even with Rafael Devers. Welcome back, Bryce. Hello, how have you been? I'm doing pretty good. Voice is back. Holidays are over, and getting back into the swing of things. Put out a few videos today. Baseball, a little bit of football, some basketball as well. You guys can check those out on the YouTube page as well. This Correa stuff is crazy, and I wonder what that one team that reached out today and Carlos is talking to now. It is the Minnesota Twins. They have been the team that's reached out, and it says in the article that at least one team not only is talking to his agent about possibly coming, but actually negotiating as far as contract length, those types of deals. That's when you have to start worrying if you're a New York Mets fan. It's not just, hey, we like the idea of Carlos Correa. Maybe we can woo him to come to our team. Maybe we could be a fit for him. No, it's at the point where contracts are being negotiated. And when you look at the Minnesota Twins, they had him on their payroll last year. They paid him $35 million in average annual value last year. You got to feel that if they're willing to get back into it, they're comfortable with where the medicals stand. And you got to think at 10 years, 285, if they already knew what the medicals were then, maybe they get back to that original offer, maybe even up it to 10 years, 300, 11 years, 300, something like that would be something, if I'm Carlos Correa, that would interest me because I want a fully guaranteed contract. That's been his stance with the New York Mets. He does not want offset language in it, and if the Twins are willing to give it to him, he might just stay with the Minnesota Twins. Trevor Bauer will probably be released tomorrow and post YouTube videos of him throwing, and he's fluctuating a lot. He was at 97 and then 91 yesterday indoors. Bauer, I think, is going to excite a lot of different front offices out there, mainly because he's a pitcher who has a great track record of success when he's on the mound. The question is, he hasn't been on the mound for a little while now. How effective is he really? And you got to remember, he's going to be released by the Dodgers. They're going to be on the hook for roughly $23 million of that. I wonder how much the next team is going to end up having to pay him. I think this is going to work out a lot like the Eric Hosmer deal with the San Diego Padres, then traded to the Boston Red Sox, now with the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs are only going to have to pay a prorated portion of the league minimum salary, that kind of thing. So they're only paying you like $720 million, I think, for Eric Hosmer. For Trevor Bauer, I think it's going to cost something very similar for the next team that signs him. And got to remember, Trevor Bauer is going to be trying to rehabilitate his career. So he's going to be coming in on his best behavior, showing up early, leaving late, those types of things. And he's going to be looking for that next mega contract. So you got to think he's going to come in, perform well. If you're a team that has holes in your starting rotation still, you might want to make a call to Trevor Bauer. Now, of course, there's tons of off-the-field concerns as well. Off-the-field baggage that he brings with him. As far as on the field, where is his performance going to be at? But it's going to cost you very minimal investment. But I think it's going to be a very good market for him, more than what we would have thought otherwise. I think the only teams that are going to be out are only going to have questions about the off-the-field issues, and that's why they're going to steer clear of him. Otherwise, I would imagine most other teams would have interest just because it's not going to cost them a whole heck of a lot. And it sounded like in the article from Peter Gammons, I think, as far as why the Dodgers are wanting to go ahead and release him. It's not necessarily what the front office thinks about him that they're doing it. It's not necessarily the media and all those kinds of things. The reason why the Dodgers are releasing Trevor Bauer is because of what the clubhouse there in LA thinks. They don't want him a part of their team. The players on the team told management, we do not want him here. Period. That's why Trevor Bauer is out. Has nothing to do with his off-the-field things or media pressure or the front office just thinking it's not good to have it around the clubhouse. No, the clubhouse has spoken, and they said they do not want him here. Got to wonder about other clubhouses around the league if they're going to have the same issues as the Dodgers. But you got to think, like Bryce, you just said, you think the Rangers could be in there? The Rangers have a plethora of good starting pitchers. I don't think that you can ever have too many of them, especially when you consider the contract that it's going to take to get Trevor Bauer in at a league minimum salary. And something any team out there that has a hole in their rotation would certainly need to pay attention to, especially if he gets anywhere back to the level of success that he had with the Dodgers, that or in the short time that he was with the Dodgers before he was led away from suspended, we'll put it that way. And of course with the Cleveland Guardians before that. But we'll see where he ends up going. A little bit of other news anyway around Major League Baseball. The Brewers did indeed bring in starting pitcher Wade Miley. He returns to the Milwaukee Brewers. Had a nice run of success there previously. And Wade Miley, 1 year, $4.5 million deal, I believe. Gets a little bit of incentives at the back end of that deal as well. So Brewers lengthening out that rotation just a little bit more. The one issue with the Brewers so far is they haven't really replaced offensive production with Renfroe and Wong no longer being there. They're counting on a lot of young guys there. I still wonder if we see a trade among those starting pitchers. Wade Miley does give them some insurance if they decide to go the trade route, move one of those starting pitchers to try to, get a little bit younger, save some money, and be able to get contracts extended for one of the starting pitchers and maybe Adames. We'll see how the Brewers end up handling it. But Wade Miley, even if they keep their team as currently constructed, should be a good number 4 or 5 starter in that rotation. Another agreement that we saw is the Arizona Diamondbacks agreed to a 1-year, $4 million deal with Evan Longoria a few days ago. That deal became official today. We put out that video about that yesterday. If you guys want to check it out, you guys can kind of pick that up on our YouTube page. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the like button if you wouldn't mind. And the other move they made today is they brought back Zach Davies. Gives them some more rotation depth for the Arizona Diamondbacks. For my money, they are right there neck and neck with the San Francisco Giants as to who will finish third in that division. I'm sorry, Giants fans. I know I got a lot of you guys here, but I just don't believe in your team this year. We saw after the 107-win team, they really fell back down to earth. A lot of that team is no longer there anymore. You're bringing in a couple of guys who have a lot of injuries in their track record anyway. And, of course, you have 1 year left on Brandon Crawford. This seems like a team that's a bunch of hired guns trying to make things work in a stopgap year, if you will. Seems like a team that's trying to be pushed together to try to make a decent run at a 500 record. Maybe get a qualifying offer on one of the starting pitchers out there. Say Stripling performs really, really well. Maybe he could be extended a qualifying offer. Same thing with Manaea. If they finish with an ERA under 3, maybe the Giants decide to give them a qualifying offer, get draft pick compensation back for him. Conforto is a huge injury risk for me. Haniger, of course, has missed a lot of time due to injury over the last couple of years, but to me, he's been their best offseason signing outside of Stripling and Manaea. And then, of course, the failed attempt at going after Aaron Judge, the failed attempt for Carlos Correa, and it just doesn't look pretty there in San Francisco. That's why, to me, that's why they have had the worst offseason so far out of all the teams in Major League Baseball. Up until this Devers deal, Boston was tied for second with the Minnesota Twins. If the Twins somehow managed to pry away Carlos Correa from his commitment to the New York Mets, they go from a loser this offseason to an absolute winner. I mean, you're talking about a team last year who had to overpay for Carlos Correa, giving him $35 million annually over 3 years with opt-outs after the first and second year. So say Carlos Correa got injured, missed the entire season last year, guaranteed Carlos Correa opts into this year's contract and takes $35 million, performs well, opts out after year 2. It was not a win-win contract for the team and player. Sure, you got a great productive player in your lineup, and it kind of got the ball rolling in this direction, but now that he might sign a fully guaranteed 10-year plus deal with your team, that would be a significant franchise-altering move for the Minnesota Twins, so kind of keep your eyes peeled for what happens there. Maybe revenge with the Padres to destroy the Dodgers. They need pitching. That is true. That is the one team I think could handle something like this. The Padres absolutely need some starting pitching. I thought they could have used a guy like Chris Bassett. He went to Toronto, I believe. I thought they could have used a guy like Kota Senga. He ended up going to the Mets. They just didn't really add to that rotation like I thought they would. They did a nice job keeping some of the pieces there. And, of course, the biggest addition they made was Xander Bogaerts as their new everyday starting shortstop. So they certainly improved their roster. I just wonder if they need to add one more piece to that rotation to get it back to where it was last year. Remember, that rotation 2 years ago had its ups and downs anyway. It looked like they had a whole bunch of starters who all had a track record of success, but it just didn't work. Last year, it all seemed to kind of come together. Darvish was back to his career averages, those types of things, and we saw a much better performance out of that starting staff. Now another year past that, we'll see how that rotation works together, but Manaea's no longer there. They've had a couple of exits now. We'll see if they're able to bring in a guy like Trevor Bauer or another starter out there to kind of round out that rotation. Brian Reynolds to the Yankees, I'm calling it. He was mentioned a lot in the Yankees hot stove today. New executive Omar Minaya talked to Cashman and said they are not done adding star talent. I would agree with that. I think the Yankees probably are the team that's most interested in Brian Reynolds. I think the Rangers could use him as well, but I don't think the Rangers are willing to pay that level of price tag for him. For me, I think he has 3 years left on his deal. I think he's the perfect piece to kind of play in left field, maybe even in center occasionally. Probably a little bit more 50-50 anyway, but is a good left-handed hitting bat for them. Contact hitter, gives them a little bit of pop as well. I think he'd be a great fit with New York. The question is, are they willing to give it the prospects necessary to do it? Do they have the prospects necessary to do it as well? Is another question. They're said to be looking for a starting pitcher, kind of a high quality starting pitcher back in return. I'm not sure the Yankees are willing to trade the prospect that's going to be required to get it done. Even if they did, they still going to have to add more talent to it because their top pitching prospects aren't nearly as good as the other teams that are interested in bringing him in as well. So we'll see if the Yankees get it done. The other piece of news for the Yankees, I'm still following it all offseason long, is what ends up happening with Pablo Lopez. I am of the belief the Miami Marlins are going to move off of that pitcher anyway. They have a lot of good young pitching coming, so they need to create holes in that rotation over the next couple of years, and they also need to improve that lineup. And this is one piece that could drastically improve their lineup if they make the right deal. That's why the deal with Boston makes a lot of sense if I'm a Miami Marlins fan. Bringing a guy like Tristan Casas would kind of solve your hole at first base. Garrett Cooper can kind of be a DH, platoon guy there until Casas is ready to take over the position permanently. But if you make a deal like that, you guarantee yourself one of the blue chip prospects at first base. Outside of that, maybe you go to the Yankees and get Peraza. They're said to not be really high on him either. You could get Gleyber Torres, again, a guy they're not really high on. But in either event, the Miami Marlins need to turn in some of that pitching that they have on the roster right now into some hitting potential for the future. Because they have some dominant starting pitchers coming in that pipeline. They already have Sandy Alcantara. I want to say the 19-year-old phenom is Perez, I want to say his name is. We talked a little bit about him on Monday, so you guys can check out that live as well. But kind of keep your eyes peeled for what the Miami Marlins end up doing with their starting pitching. I think Pablo Lopez is the most likely guy to be traded, but don't be surprised if they deal a couple of their starters, like a Jesus Luzardo, somebody who could bring in another, everyday level major league player. Gene Segura signed there for 2 years, $17 million. They have the agreement with Jorge Soler from last year. Viciel Garcia. So they have some veterans already on that roster. They need to get some higher end prospects to come up with that young pitching that they have coming. Damar Hamlin is awake and recovering now. Thank God. Prayers to him and his family. That was a scary scene. Absolutely. He is awake. He actually wrote on a dry erase board, I believe is what they had said. Or he wrote down to the doctors anyway, hey, did we win the game? And the doctor told him, you won the game of life. And he absolutely did, to be able to survive what he went through. And congratulations, Damar. Hopefully you continue to get on the mend and just happy to see he's doing well. Alrighty. We saw an agreement as well, or kind of touching on some of the other news from around Major League Baseball. Phillies made the agreement official with Craig Kimbrell. We saw the Washington Nationals bring in a first baseman, Dom Smith. A lot of you New York Mets fans might be familiar with him. In 2020, the COVID-shortened year was absolutely off the charts as far as a hitter. We saw a lot of those short season players for the New York Mets have really great years that year. But again, they really haven't been able to capture it since then. J.D. Davis, Dom Smith are kind of the players I'm referring to here. And neither one of them has been able to recapture that success they had that year. J.D. Davis, I believe, is with the San Francisco Giants right now. And then Dom Smith gets another chance as a starting job. First baseman, he'll be the everyday first baseman for the Washington Nationals next year. Also, I think Tristan Casas' value should not be as high as it is. I don't think the industry views him as highly, but I think a team like the Miami Marlins, who have struggled to get high-end offensive talent either on the major league roster or in the prospect ranks anyway, they could use just about anybody there. And if Tristan Casas is the headliner piece for you, I think you'd still need another piece there if I'm the Miami Marlins. But that'd be a very good blue chip type prospect for you to kind of headline a package with. You'd like to round it out with a little bit more potential in there as well, but that'd be a good get for the Miami Marlins for a guy like Pablo Lopez. It will cost more because it is a controllable starting pitcher. That would not be the end of the deal. So kind of keep your eyes peeled again for what the ultimate final trade is for a guy like Pablo Lopez. Expect position player talent going back to Miami in return. But as I mentioned here at the Upside, we cover the MLB, NBA, NFL, and the NHL. NHL announced a lot of their All-Stars today. They'll have the final vote for the final roster addition to the All-Star game here in the next week or so. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. All-Star voting for the NBA has also begun as well. So if you guys want to vote for your favorite player, go ahead and do so. I put out a video today about Luka Doncic anyway. You guys might want to check out that. He is doing something in the NBA no player has ever done in NBA history. Not Wilt, Not Michael Jordan, not Larry Bird, not Magic Johnson, not LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. Nobody has done what Luka's been doing over the past couple of weeks. He absolutely deserves to be in that MVP frontrunner conversation. To me, it's a three-horse race right now between Doncic, Embiid, and Jokic. If Doncic does not have a good game, the Mavericks have no chance of winning. We just saw that tonight. Poor shooting tonight. You can see he's suffering from a little bit of a cold as well during the game. And literally has just been worn ragged over the last couple of weeks because he's literally had to carry that team, not just on the offensive side of the floor as far as just his scoring, also with his rebounding, with his being able to get to set up other players wide open shots, and they either, well, I'll put it this way. They miss a lot more than they make their wide open shots, but he still gets around 9 assists a game. And then on the defensive end of the floor, he is no longer just a turnstile there defensively. He's a very good block shot, or excuse me, he steals the ball quite a bit as well, is able to move his feet a little bit better, and we're seeing a different type of Luka Doncic this year. Came into training camp already in shape, played overseas basketball, international basketball during the offseason. He had a fantastic offseason and so far has raised his scoring average over 6 points a game from last year. His three-point shooting percentage over the last couple weeks, career high, 42.5%. He is on another level right now, but Jokic and Embiid are right there, right behind him, in my opinion, as 1, 2, 3 for the MVP. 4, 5 could be Giannis and Tatum. Tatum, I think, is more of a team-centric award for him. How good the Boston Celtics have been, even with a suspended head coach took them to the NBA Finals last year, kind of riding the ship. They have a whole lot more weapons, though. They have a clear-cut number 2 there with Jaylen Brown. They have the Defensive Player of the Year with Marcus Smart. They have the wily veteran with Horford there. They brought in Malcolm Brogdon. To me, would have been a perfect fit for the Dallas Mavericks to replace Jalen Brunson. But again, the Mavericks did nothing essentially aside from Christian Wood, and he's performed well and has even improved defensively as well, but there's not a second star there for Luka. There's nobody there besides him and maybe Spencer Dinwiddie to handle the ball, and he's literally having to do everything for that offense. The other video I put out today was the New York Jets. Bryce, you just asked the question, who should be the Jets quarterback in your opinion? I put out a video about that today. You might want to check that one out. Just so you guys, in case you guys were wondering, the New York Jets drafted Zach Wilson a couple years ago, and things just have not worked out, to say it kindly. He lost the locker room, if you will, kind of an arrogant kid at this point, and just never really got mature enough to handle the quarterback position. The defense is certainly carrying that team right now. Sauce Gardner looks like the top cornerback in the NFL. You remember Revis Island all those years ago with Rex Ryan on that head coach in New York, and with Mark Sanchez as their quarterback. Think of something like that as what the New York Jets should model going into the next couple of years. For next year, they need somebody who can complete the ball, move the chains, not turn over the ball. And to me, that means they're not going to be able to draft one of those top quarterbacks. They currently sit at number 13 in the draft. They're probably going to draft somewhere by the end of the season between 10 and 14, depending on how the final week of the season goes. And to me, that means all three of the top quarterbacks are already going to be gone. Levis, Young, and Stroud are all going to go probably in that top 5 to 6 picks. You're going to have to leapfrog a couple of teams. That means you're going to have to trade your first-round pick next year and your number 10 pick to kind of leapfrog into that top 5 to get the quarterback you want. Maybe even into that top 3, maybe top 2. And that might be overdrafting those quarterbacks. But you always do that in the NFL. And say you really like Will Levis. Well, he's got a strong arm. We saw that with Zach Wilson as somebody who has a lot of arm talent. But the between the head stuff is what you really have to get your mind around. Is he going to be able to complete the ball? Take the check down when it's there, not force it into triple coverage just to make a play. Those types of things. Young and Stroud a little bit more mobile as far as a quarterback, a lot more pedigree as far as championship level football, as far as with Ohio State and Alabama. And if you like those programs, maybe those are the quarterbacks you like, if you like them coming from that type of environment into your team. I do like Stroud as far as his pro potential and Young, but again, I just don't think they're going to be there for the Jets. And if I'm the Jets, I'm not trading 2 first-round picks, my number 10 this year or 13, wherever it ends up, and my next year's first-round pick to get into the top 5, top 3, plus whatever else is going to be necessary to get it done. And you're going to have to live with all the rookie mistakes. That defense is ready to win now. Breece Hall is a dynamic running back, so you can run the ball, those kinds of things. And if I'm the Jets, I do not want to go after one of those rookie quarterbacks. Now, the names that I'm going to mention next are not going to excite you as a Jets fan. So if you're a New York Jets fan, you might want to tune me out because these are not going to be good names for you. But to me, they're a lot more likely for you and might lead to a lot more playoff success as well. First name I'll mention is the guy I don't think they should go for, and that's Derek Carr. Whether that be via trade if he gets outright released, or if he doesn't get released, and if he does get released, whether signing him. He's a good player, but he requires an offensive-minded coach for him to have the success that he had with John Gruden. You saw over the last couple of years without John Gruden, his numbers take a significant dip, especially completion percentage. And they asked him to do a little bit different things with the Josh McDaniels offense this year. And even with a number one receiver like Devontae Adams, he just wasn't able to get the job done. He's still a good quarterback, but I wouldn't give him the reins in New York unless my top option was already gone. In case you guys are wondering who it is, it's Jimmy Garoppolo. That's why I said it's not exactly the world's sexiest pick, but for me, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and with no training camp, no practice time, literally was foisted upon that roster and wasn't given it any chance to get any type of correlation with any of the receivers. Literally had to create it on his own. There's not a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that has ever been asked to do that, let alone players who've already been on that team for more than a year. And this entire offseason, the speculation was, hey, we're going to trade you. You saw the goodbye hug with John Lynch in the tunnel last year in the playoffs. And, hey, thank you for everything you did. You're going to move on. They kept him. And good thing they did, because Trey Lance went down. They had to keep him there. Now, Brock Purdy certainly seems to have taken over the reins there. And, of course, they have to figure out what they're going to do with Trey Lance long term. There's rumors about Tom Brady even going there. But for me, Jimmy Garoppolo's time in San Francisco looks like it's over. There is a connection there from San Francisco with Robert Saleh when he was the defensive coordinator there with the San Francisco 49ers. A little bit more familiarity there. And, of course, a run-first heavy scheme is what the New York Jets are going to run with a dynamic running back in Breece Hall there. That defense is very, very good. They just need a quarterback who's not going to turn over the ball. They need somebody who can get first downs, allow their defense to get a breather every now and again, and then go right back out there and dominate once again. But for me, Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy I would want if I'm a New York Jets fan anyway. Just the completion percentage, the maturity in the pocket. He might not throw the ball 30 yards down the field and complete, 5 of those a game. I don't think he's that level of quarterback. Could he get you, first down every now and again? Absolutely. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo does, and that's what they've asked him to do in San Francisco. That's what they would ask him to do in New York. Welcome back. Who's on first? Appreciate you coming back. Welcome back, Jose. Does anyone know the details of the Devers contract? I heard on MLB Network that it doesn't contain a no-trade clause. It does contain a no-trade clause, is what we've been led to believe so far. And still 11 years, I want to say $331 million. You hear different reports as to whether or not it's 333 or 331, but I think it's 331 is what the final tally is. We'll see what they end up announcing. But overall, just a great deal for Rafael Devers. Yankees made a little bit of noise anyway, bringing in a couple of executives. We mentioned earlier, Bryce brought up earlier anyway, Omar Minaya was brought in for the New York Yankees anyway. And then, of course, Brian Sabean, the former San Francisco Giants general manager, he is now back with the Yankees after being with them from 85 to 92, I believe, when Cashman was still coming up through the ranks of that Yankees front office. It's kind of what we've seen over the Major League Baseball over the last couple of days. We touched on the Carlos Correa news, is that he's at least in negotiations with at least one other team. That one other team, at least the one so far, is the Minnesota Twins. I would not be surprised if there's at least 2 or 3 others that have at least now made calls to try to exchange contract figures as to what it would take to bring Carlos Correa. But no team is as comfortable with Carlos Correa's medicals as the Minnesota Twins. And that's just because they already know what they are. They already have access to those. And that's because he was there last year. Now, of course, the Houston Astros have some familiarity there. They already have their guy, though, in Jeremy Pena. The Mets now have their medicals after getting the physical done. The Giants do as well. Maybe the Giants get back into this. The Texas Rangers are said to still be very interested in bringing in one more bat, a middle-of-the-order type bat. And there's not a lot of those guys on the trade market. So maybe they ask Carlos Correa to play left field. I've floated that idea a couple of different times now. I still don't think it's very likely to happen at all. I still think the Mets are very likely to finally get the deal done for him. As I mentioned earlier in this video, Carlos Correa actually went to the stadium there with the Mets anyway, played some ball with his kid, had an I Love New York shirt on, and you can just see he wants to be in the big market, and we'll see if they end up getting a contract done. But it sounds like Correa's camp wants a fully guaranteed contract, the one that was agreed to, 12 years, 315 million. He doesn't want to sacrifice guaranteed money for offset language or things like that. So we'll see if he's willing to bend or if he wants to stick to his guns and just get the job or get the deal done fully guaranteed with whichever team ends up giving him that full guarantee. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. If you guys want to send us a question on any one of our videos, I know we had somebody give us a really long explanation of why Russell Wilson was a dynamic quarterback still over the last couple of years. All I'm going to say is check out his football reference page. He has not been the same player you think he has. You might want to check those stats on the ones that you gave me in the comment section. And just check up on what he's been doing over the last couple of years. He is no longer the Russell Wilson of old. And Sean Payton is going to have his pick of where he wants to go this offseason anyway, which coaching stop he wants to go to. I think the Chargers they don't really look like a stop for him right now because it looks like Staley's going to be able to stay there in that spot, and that's, I think, the perfect situation for any quarterback or any coach right now, and it looks like that spot is not going to open up. Now, of course, the other spots that are going to be available and already are available so far anyway, the Denver Broncos, Carolina Panthers. I think you could have an argument about the Dallas Cowboys opening up if they fail in the first round of the playoffs this year. I think the Cleveland Browns are in that similar kind of a boat. Stefanski really hasn't done much since he's gotten to the Cleveland Browns, and of course they had to work with backup quarterbacks in Jacoby Brissett this year, and maybe getting some continuity with Deshaun Watson. Maybe they decide to give him one more year, but for me, I would bring in another offensive-minded coach like a Sean Payton. That would bring some real integrity, stability to that organization that they've never had. But is Sean Payton really willing to go to Cleveland? But the one spot I did mention in the video I put out earlier this week as the most likely, in my opinion, the team I would pick if I were Sean Payton, is the Arizona Cardinals. You have a quarterback that's locked up, somebody who's going to be there for a very long time, young enough to still be teachable a little bit. He is small, but you already had some comfort with a small quarterback in Drew Brees, and he already seems to have started formulating his head coaching staff anyway, or as far as who he wants to bring in. It sounds like Vic Fangio will be his defensive coordinator. That would be a great fit for him going to the Arizona Cardinals. I wonder if there's any surprise team coming in last second for Correa. I think there'll be some that you're not expecting, some that I haven't even mentioned that could pry open the door and just say, hey, Correa, you want a fully guaranteed deal? We'll do it on these terms. We might see a lot of teams try to make those type of offers, but it seems like the New York Mets are sticking to their talking points as far as wanting offset language in there, those kinds of things. Correa's sticking to his, wanting a fully guaranteed deal, and if they're not willing to budge either one of them, it leaves the door open for one of these other teams to get in there and get the deal done with Carlos Correa. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help us out. Posted a few videos today here on our YouTube page. Make sure you check those out as well. Video about Carlos Correa we posted around 11 o'clock this morning. Make sure you check that one out. Gives you all the updates you might want to know about Carlos Correa. The only update that's not in there is the Minnesota Twins being the team that's actually talked with Carlos Correa's camp as possibly being willing to take on a fully guaranteed contract for Carlos Correa. That video with that update will be coming out tomorrow. We'll have a few more updates as well about the Rafael Devers contract. We'll have a few other updates as well from around Major League Baseball. The NBA is getting closer and closer to the trade season anyway. With the All-Star break coming up here in a few weeks anyway, something to kind of keep your eye on as the trade market kind of percolates there in the NBA. The NHL, whole lot of crazy storylines so far this year. A lot of teams that were not expected to get off to great starts absolutely did. You had the World Juniors tournament just kind of wrap up today. That was absolutely amazing. The U.S. versus Sweden game, back and forth and back and forth. I think the final score was 8-7 or something like that. It was absolutely insane. 9-8. It was in that range anyway. But if you guys missed that, you might want to check it out on the NHL Network when they do replay it. That game was insane. That was for the bronze medal. And I believe Canada took home gold today in the game that came right after that. But overall, just a great time in sports right now. Football, of course. You have the playoffs coming up right around the corner. One more week of the NFL. A lot of you guys playing fantasy football. Most of your leagues have already concluded. There's some leagues out there that go through week 18, and it seems like a lot of teams are already kind of throwing up the white flag. The Washington Commanders, for instance, starting their third-string quarterback, Sam Howell. I understand you got to figure out what you have in the young guy, but you're not exactly trying to win, and I understand you're not in playoff contention. You need to find out what you got in Sam Howell, but Carson Wentz doesn't seem to like he's going to be sticking around in Washington after this year. Taylor Heineke, depending on what happens with the coaching staff, if Ron Rivera stays or if they draft a quarterback or whatever they end up deciding to do at quarterback, Taylor Heineke may or may not be there next season. But Sam Howell, maybe he establishes himself as a great NFL quarterback. Who knows? He'll be going up against a very good defense and a team that has to win this week if they want a chance to win the number one seed against from the Philadelphia Eagles anyway, the tops of the division. There is still a chance the Dallas Cowboys win the number one seed in the NFC. They'd need San Francisco to lose. They already got Minnesota to lose, and now they just need Philadelphia to lose. If they get San Francisco and Philadelphia both to lose in this week, then they would get the number one seed. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for what happens in that. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think Jalen Hurts is going to come back for Philadelphia. They'll somehow manage to get back on the right page again, and they will lock up the number one seed in my opinion. I think the 49ers probably win their game as well. Not very competitive game out west for them. And we'll see how the rest of it unfolds. Tom Brady looks like he's going to be winning that NFC South division. Not exactly a greatest year for him, but he can still end up with a winning record if he wins this week at 9-8. If they get that done, they would give the Dallas Cowboys a run for their money. Remember, they beat the Dallas Cowboys back in Week 1, and we'll see if they're able to do it once again. But remember, Dallas has grown a lot since then. They've learned how to run the ball a little bit more effectively with a two-headed monster with Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. Their receivers are playing much better. They didn't really have a plan for CeeDee Lamb early on this season. Now they're finding different ways to get him involved every single week. They now have 3 different tight ends that they use very effectively. T.Y. Hilton is there to kind of help with the offense, get somebody out over the top as well. And their offense looks a whole lot different than it did back in Week 1 when they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. On the other side of the football for the Buccaneers, Mike Evans finally showed up this season. 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards receiving last week, and he hadn't really been effective at all pretty much since Week 6. I think it was the last time he had a game anywhere near this level of production. But welcome back, Mike Evans, just in time for the playoffs. Hopefully they can get back on the right page and kind of finish off the season strong, and then that would be a very good wild card weekend game. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for what happens on the NFC side. For the AFC side, again, the Damar Hamlin story is kind of running things right now on that side of things, just because, again, it's the importance of him getting back and healthy and all those kinds of things are far more important than anything that happens on the field first and foremost. But as a result of what happened on the field, the game will not be resumed anyway between the Bills and the Bengals. Sounds like they're going to go based off of win percentage. There's a whole other different things that came out today as far as what would happen in a playoff scenario if such and such team would win or such and such team would lose. There was even an idea floated about a neutral site game. There's coin tosses being involved as well. It's gotten very confusing, but again, the important thing is Damar Hamlin's safety and his health more than anything else. And neither one of those teams wanted to go back out there and finish that game that evening. It still looked. I take that back. It still looks like it's very much affecting both of those teams right now, especially Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, the head coach Sean McDermott for the Bills. There's no way their mind is on football right now, and I'm wondering if the Bills are going to be able to put up a decent effort anyway in the final week of the season. There's just a lot to go through if you're a Buffalo Bills player, fan of the NFL. Just a lot to process right now, and I think it's asking a lot for them to have any level of success. But the Bengals, of course, he wasn't necessarily their teammate, but it is part of the brotherhood of the NFL. It did happen on the field in front of them, and it's got to be impactful whenever you see what happened to Damar Hamlin right there in front of you with your own eyes. And so that's got to affect them as well in the final week of the season. Going to be curious to see how they come out and perform in Week 18 as well, see if they're able to shake it off and kind of move forward. But certainly going to impact the playoff race. We'll see how things kind of shake out after the games are complete after this week. Make sure I think the charity right now for Damar Hamlin, he started a charity to try to give toys back to his hometown. And that drive, I think, had $1,500 in it. His goal was $2,500 weeks and weeks ago. And over the past couple of days, anyway, he's raised over $7.5 million in that toy drive on his GoFundMe. So congratulations to Damar Hamlin's charity there. Hopefully, the money goes to where it's needed. And again, a speedy recovery for Damar Hamlin. But in case you guys missed it right off the top, Rafael Devers gets the big-time extension with the Boston Red Sox, kind of saving their offseason at least a little bit. They still aren't a better team at all. I mean, he was already on the roster. This just means he's not going to leave in free agency. And if you do decide to trade them or trade him after this year, now you have cost certainty to whichever team you end up moving him to. But I think Devers is going to be the guy there to stay for the next decade to the next competitive team from the Boston Red Sox. Boston just needs to tear it down, in my opinion. They need to kind of bottom out, get good draft picks, those kinds of things. We'll see if they get or if they go that route, or maybe they get lightning in a bottle like they've done before. I mean, they've been in the playoffs 6 of the last 12 years, won 2 World Series in that time. They're just a very inconsistent team, and that's kind of what the Boston Red Sox are right now. They don't compete with the likes of the Yankees right now or the Blue Jays. They're not competing with the Rays, and even the Baltimore Orioles are a step ahead of them in that division. The Red Sox, like I said, in my opinion, just need to bottom out. But if they can get lightning in a bottle, maybe, just maybe, they get back into the postseason one more time. But the other bit of news with that Carlos Correa is still kind of stuck in the middle, limbo, if you will, with the New York Mets. Will he be able to get the fully guaranteed contract he wants? Will they get the offset language that the Mets want? Who knows what will happen? But it does seem like at least one team is not just saying, hey, we're interested in bringing Carlos Correa in. Let's talk about it, see if it's a fit, those kinds of things. No, they're actually talking contract negotiations. How many years, guaranteed money, offset language, all those kinds of things. And that team is the Minnesota Twins. Now, it said there's at least one team, which means there's likely others that have at least made calls to say, hey, we'd love to bring you in. Are you interested in coming to Team X, Y, or Z? So we'll see where Carlos Correa ultimately ends up. You guys can check out that video that I posted earlier today as far as the fiasco that's going on with Carlos Correa, the whole saga from last offseason to this offseason, the Giants, the Mets, the Twins, all of that is in that video. So you guys might want to hit that subscribe button and check that video out here on YouTube. But as I mentioned, we'll have the update coming with the Minnesota Twins angle and all the other teams that could be interested in Carlos Correa's services coming out tomorrow. But thank you guys for joining us tonight. If you guys have any questions about anything, any sport, just make sure you send them on one of our videos, and we'll be sure to answer you as quickly as we can, either in the comment section or during our lives. So thank you guys for joining us again. We'll see you guys probably tomorrow night.